Okay, here we go. So we're starting on the back of the bottom half, bottom third of Daf Chaf. Oh, two more guys. Yay, thank you. The Linsky guys are here, complete with AK-15s, all right? Without the AK. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So Daf Chaf Amid Beis, we're starting new Perek Sheni. Okay. I suggest keep a bookmark in the back of the blue Gemaras for pictures, because there's a lot of great pictures. I have them if I have to share them online for anybody. But Eliezer, good morning. Good morning. All right, here we go. Ayashan tachas hamita besuka. One who sleeps under the bed in the sukkah. Lo yatsa yedei chavaso. He's not yotzei. What's he not yotzei? He's not yotzei his obligation of being in the sukkah. All right, because the primary obligation of being in the sukkah is eat, drink, and sleep. Well, wait a minute, eat, drink, and sleep, but he was sleeping. The problem is he was sleeping under the sukkah. Excuse me. He's sleeping under the bed. So we'll find out what the problem is, morning professor, when you sleep under the bed instead of on top of a bed, right? I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, Noagim hayinu, it was our practice, shayinu yeshenim tachas hamita b'fnei askenim. We've had many stories of this where the Talmidim would sleep or attempt to sleep under the rabbis' beds to kind of learn stuff, etc. It sounds kind of strange, but they didn't have YouTube in those days. All right. So so when they did this, that they slept under their rabbi's bed, they weren't told anything. And there's a saying in shtika dummy. If you don't, if you're quiet, it's means it's okay. So if no one says anything, so I'm Rav Shimon. So Rav Shimon said. So he gives a great story here. Masev b'Tavi Avdo Sheraban Gamliel. Now you have to know who this is. Tavi was a famous Evet Knani. He wasn't Jewish initially. All right. Great stories about him. All right, but he was a Talmid Chacham. I mean, this guy knew it, because he's there in the house of Rabban Gamliel. You find out stories about these workers in houses of rabbis who know more about kashrus because they learn everything that's going on, right? So there was an incident involving Talmud, that he was actually sleeping under the bed. Rabban Gamliel Iskenim, and Rabban Gamliel said to Iskenim, Re'isem, Tavi Abdi. All right, you see, Tavi Abdi, Shehu Talmid Chacham Yodeach She'avad B'Turmi Inyan Sukkah. My Tavi, he was a Talmid Chacham, and he knew that you're not Yotzei if you sleep under the bed. That's why he slept under the bed, because women and Avadim are not Chayiv in Sukkah. So since he wasn't Chayiv, he was exempt. That's why he slept under. So that's how we initially learned this. Therefore, that's why he learned under the, he slept under the bed. Forgive me that I'm looking to the side for those of you on Zoom, but my Gemara is to the left. Okay. And in passing, notice this terminology, in passing, because when we get to the end of today's Daf Yomi, we'll notice why he said in passing. We learn from this casual remark, again, casual remark, so from this whole casual story, we learned that if you sleep under a bed, you're not yotzei. So Gemara asks a question, but isn't there, but there is not 10 tvachim under a bed, right? So Shmuel interpreted the Mishnah. B'mita asara, we're dealing with a bed that is indeed 10 tvachim high. And this taught in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda does not regard a bed as an ohel that intervenes between the person underneath it and the sukkah above. We'll go into detail about this, all right? Tanan Hassam, because there's a lot of this in the next few pages. We learn in the Mishnah there, Echad chor shechararu mayim, whether it was a hollow cut out by water, Okay, if a drip of water goes over thousands of years, it eventually makes a hole. And again, great pictures in the blue Hebrew Gemara. All right, I'm sure in the Korean Gemara too. All right, O shrutzim, or by small burrowing creatures. By nature of a burrowing creature, thing is scratch out a hole. O shachalaso malachas, or that was eaten away by corrosive minerals. All right, just look at the pitting on old cars. All right. V'chein mitbach havanim. Similarly, a hollow formed by a pile of boulders. So the sides of highways says, watch out for boulders. This, that, and you go out in the Midwest where you see boulders on the ground, and then if sometimes you see the opening where the boulder came out. Whoa, v'chein svara shokoras, and similarly formed by stacks of beams. What if a bunch of wood beams fell down and it just fell? There's some spaces between the beams. All right. Mahil ala tuma. In all these cases, now what's the common denominator before these cases? Man didn't create them. These aren't man-made situations. They're not like the new sneakers, man-made materials. These just happen to be, or they're not natural causes. All right. In all these cases, the roof overhead constitutes a shelter over the tumah. All right. In other words, those things will be a shelter over the tumah. Hi, Herschel. Thanks for tuning in. We're on, but just started the Gemara bottom of, I think, Yutes Amadeus. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Amir called Ohel Sheno Asui B'Yedei Adam. So Rabbi Yehuda says any shelter that is not made by man in a ohel. It's not an ohel. Okay. Wait a minute. All the things we just listed weren't made by man. And now you're telling me, Rabbi Yehuda says, but these are not ohels. So we have a problem. My time I do Rabbi Yehuda. So what is Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning for ruling that an ohel not made by man is not an ohel, is not a tent in regard to Tuma? All right, we're the top of Chaf Aleph. I'm sorry, I just said Yutes by man Chaf. So now the first line in Yud Aleph. So we learned it from the word ohel, tent, in certain psukim. All right. Yalef ohel mi mishkan. He derives this from the case of the tabernacle. It's just called mishkan, through the gezerah shav established by the words tent, common to both contexts. Ksiv hacha, for this written here, zos toras adam ki yamas ba'ohel. So he brings first pasuk. This is the law regarding a man who dies in the tent. Ksiv hasam, and over there by the mishkan, it says, vayifras as ha'oah mishkan. Moshe spread the tent over the mishkan. Ma'lahalan b'yedei adam. So what Moshe did it over there, you see, was manual labor. So too here, afkan b'yedei adam. So the ohel has to be made by man. Therefore, that would exclude all the categories we just mentioned that were, non-man-made, but natural. So the boulder that came out, the falling bricks, all the things, the shrutzim, the water, the things we just mentioned. So Gemara now attempts to explain this, Rav Yehuda's disputing the Tanakh of the Mishnah in Olos. Rabbanan, and why do the rabbis dispute Rabbi Yehuda and rule that even a naturally formed ohel transmits tumah? So this is the machlokes ohel riba. All right, he says, for they hold that the repetitive expressions of ohel and ohel written in the context of tumah come to include in the law even a naturally formed ohel. So the Gemara, typical fashion goes back from A to B. It's like fighters in the ring. Gemara returns to the position of Rabbi Yehuda, noting an apparent contradiction. Between his rulings. The Seber Rabbi Yehuda koel sheino asay b'yedei adam eino ohel. But does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that any shelter that's not made by man isn't really a shelter? And we know who. This is in contrast, this ruling of Rabbi Yehuda in another Mishnah where it states, Chatzeres hayu, that's in Holos, Chatzeres hayu benuyos b'Yerushalayim. There were courtyards built in Yerushalayim, al gabe sela. They were built on bedrock. All right? Right. The tachtonim chalo, but underneath them they would make a hollow beneath them. Remember, recently we learned that in Yerushalayim they had these arches and this and that, one arch and another, all to prevent tumah, or just in case something was buried below. So he says, and that's what he says here, b'nei kvar hatom, out of concern for a grave of the deep, all right? That there might be buried below somebody that we didn't know about 500 years before, someone will get tummy. Remember, those were the days, my friends, when tumah was a big thing. They lived with tumah. They had a base on mikdash. We don't have that anymore, So we're all tummy. What do you think, tummy or not? We're all tummy. All right. Mavim nashim uras. Listen to this. Mavim nashim ubaras v'yodasham. They would bring women to these courtyards. These women who were pregnant, who would give birth there. So they didn't want these women to become tummy. All right. So that's why they would hollow out to make sure that there was space to stop the tumor from going up in case there was a grave from below. All right. And they would raise their children there for the sake of the para aduma. All right. So this is a whole thing that with the tzedukim. The tzedukim only would follow the Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah. All right. They knew that you couldn't be tomei with whoever was sprinkling the water on para aduma, all right, on the red heifer. All right. So they would follow this thing, if I'm saying this right, that to make sure these women would give birth there, then these children we kind of kept in isolation or some on these bridges or whatever till they were like 7 years old, but not 9 years old when they could become tummy, all right, so that they'd have these 7 and 8 year olds available to sprinkle the water. Our halacha is that if the Kohen became tummy, so he went to mikveh at night, he was a full yom, tummy for a day, queen for a day, tummy for a day, and then he's wake up, he's okay again. But going back to those days, all right, so how did they keep these children who now were 8 years old, and it was time for them to do the sprinkling on the para aduma? How did they keep them still from being tamei? Listen to this. Mevim shvarim, they would bring oxen, valgabein delasas, and they took the doors off the houses, or maybe they had, went to Home Depot and got doors. There's a great picture in there. So they took a door, they lined it on top of the ox horizontally, and the little kid sat on there like it was Aladdin on a flying carpet. All right? And he had a cup made out of earthenware, so it couldn't become tamei. And then he'd go right to the local water, which we'll say in a moment, and they'd lower either the kid would get down and pick up the water, or they'd lower the cup and get the water, or they tie the cup like a fishing rod to the horn of the ox. So when the ox bent down to drink water, the cup also filled up with water. So all these different ways for the kid to get water without becoming tummy. And there's great pictures in there. The cups of stone were in their hands, all right, because the stone or the earthenware would not become tavi. Higil shiluach, when they reached the Shiluach spring, that was the name of the spring near Yerushalayim.
Excuse me, teacher. You said a word I'm not familiar with. What is water?
Okay, it's Coca-Cola without the Coca-Cola part.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yad l'sach hamayim miluim, and the children would stop it. All right, and the milu, and so the children would. The first version here is they would actually get off these boards, come down and fill up the cups of the water, right? For all over Yasrulahan, and then they would descend and go back and sit on the doors. Rabbi Yossi says the child wouldn't dismount from the ox to draw the water, but he'd lower the cup via rope. I mentioned that previously, and there's pictures of how we could do it, or either with the horn or just lower up itself. B'bnei kever tahom. Again, because concerns of graves of the deep. All right. How often people were buried. I mean, waterfront property is worth a lot if you're living. It ain't worth anything if you're not living, unfortunately. And nobody went to bury people there on purpose in these springs. So they weren't really worried, or he wasn't worried that the child would go down and fill up the cup, because this was how he felt it would be filled up, because there wasn't tumor there, and they get back on top of the wadur on top of the ox, right? The Tanya, and it was taught in another brisa concerning this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo hayu mevim dilasis. They would not bring doors, elas shvarim, but they'd actually bring what was called wide-bellied oxen. So why did he say this? All right, and who is saying this? This is the same Rabbi Yehuda. So why is he saying they wouldn't use the door method? Because he says, we'll explain that kids, you put a door like this, what are they going to want to do? Either they're going to surf on the board, and stick their hands out, or they're going to bend over to look what's underneath. So what good is the door protecting them from tumor if they're going to extend their extremities or their head, right? So they got this wide-bellied ox, which were from Egypt, which were larger than the little kids who were below, at that time, 7, 8 years old. And they couldn't go anywhere. They just sit there, and that was the safer method. All right? Okay. But oxen in the case...
Safer.
No, safer Smith. Okay. But oxen are a case of a shelter that's not made by man. Guess what? We just said Yehuda said this was he learned in the other brisa a method using the ox itself. Is an ox made by man-made? Previously, we said man-made materials were what we say, good for tumor or bad for tumor. Whatever we said before, which I don't remember at the moment, this contradicts it. The Katani, the Brisa states, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo haya mivin dilasis elash farm. We just said that. Okay. Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Rav Eliezer. So we're going to get an explanation. Rav Dimi came, all right, to Babylonia. He said the name of Rav Elazar. Moda Rabbi Yehuda Kimlo Egraf. Rabbi Yehuda agrees in the case of a naturally formed shelter as large as a fist, that it is deemed an ohel with regard to tumor. Okay, so he said before the naturally weren't for tumor, but he's saying now if it is the shelter is as large as a fist, it is considered a tent regarding tumor. Now it's not our fist, it's this famous Rav who had this, or person who had this giant fist. His name is like son of a watermelon. I don't mention his name in a moment here. Or maybe it was in the commentary, but it was a very large fist. All right, and so if you think of an ox, all right, there's plenty of room under an ox's belly for a watermelon. So it is a large fist's worth. So therefore, the ox, even though it is not man-made, can still serve as an ohel. All right. If you're not getting it the first time, you're gonna have to Ibr Chazan. Ibr Chazan, that's the third word to add to Ibr Glibna, and which means leftover. And what's the other rabbi's famous word? And Amin Givix type of growth. They're all funny sounding words. All right. Tanya Namihachi. It was also taught in the Brisa. Mother Rabbi Yehuda Bashakifin. So Rabbi Uvenkike Haslam. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that in the cases of uprooted boulders, meaning the boulder that fell out of the side of the mountain, and rock crevices that ended up resulting in shelters. As you go to the Midwest, there's all these pictures of the crevices of people kind of crawling and try and take a picture in there. All right. Even though they're naturally formed, that this is deemed an ohel in regard to tumah. All right. So it would be an ohel, which means if you were in there and a dead body was in there too, the person would become mitame. All right. Would be the dead body would mitame the person. Okay. But surely we have the case of a door which has several fists of office space separating it from the ground. The katani, yet the Brisa states, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo ayu, mevi and delasus elis from. But Rabbi Yehuda says, you would just bring this from. So again, this seems to be contradictory. What's going on here? Is the door itself good with display space, or do you have to bring this from? And Rabbi Yehuda seems to be quoted in both places. So Abaye says, Lo hutshachu lavi delasus. What Rabbi Yehuda meant to say, or means to say, is that they had no need to bring the doors because they could have used the wide-bellied oxen themselves. Rava says, La you mevin delasus ko ikar. Who is it? It says, Rava says, what Rabbi Yehuda means they would deliberately not bring the doors at all. So both these commentaries are supporting Rabbi Yehuda. One says they didn't have to bring the doors. The other is saying they didn't need the doors at all. Right? Big alav. Because since a child's attitude is only confident when he's sitting on a door, Shema Yotzi Rosh, overly confident, Shema Yotzi Rosho or Echad Me Avorav Bitame. The only time a kid, all right, is going to be overly confident when he's balanced there on the door, he feels really safe, then he goes and does the wrong thing, sticks out his hands, does his surfing, or bends over. And, reminds me, when we built our house like 30 years ago, so at that time, it was like only one of the few second-story houses now that's seeing them built all over the place. So we built a loft, all right? And the lofts have like a half wall, like a half door ledge, right? And right after we built it, we kept on seeing, we were all little kids. All they would do is go over to this ledge and either get on the chair or climb up to stick over their head to look down. All right, it's just like what the Gemara says. So we had to solve it because they were giving us, ajina for, leaning over. So we called the builder back. We said, do us a favor, put windows in the loft wall. So in between the studs, they cut out rectangles and they put like 5 or 6 windows. Guess what?
What?
When the kids walked up, there was no reason to bend over because they could see right through, right? So certain situations, kids will do things. So when the kids were on a wide belly ox, where are they going to go? Okay. So continuing, we're now on the, where are we now?
So you said if they did use doors, they should have put windows or siding on the door so the kids wouldn't stick their hands out.
No. Okay. This just jumped on me electrically. Where are we up to? We should be.
Base.
It's very concerning when the teacher asks the class, where are we up to?
No, because the thing jumped electrically. We're on the first line of Amud Beis Chaf Aleph, right? All right. So it starts off Bekevat Ham, from a grave of the deep, all right? Because they said when they ride on top of the ox, they'll cling to it because they're afraid to fall over it. They are not overconfident like they were on the board, the door. Tani Kavasi the Rabbah. So the Gemara is going to cite a brisa in support of Rabba's explanation. All right. Rabbi Yehuda Amir, and it's always going back to Rabbi Yehuda, trying to explain them. Rabbi Yehuda said, Lo ayu mivim delasas ko, and this sounds very repetitive. Lo ayu mivim delasas koika. They didn't bring doors at all to support the children. Because the children are overly confident when they sit on it. We just said this, except now we're bringing it from a brisa. Shemiyotzi Rasho or Echad Miyavarav, because they might bend over their head or stick their hands out. V'yitamai b'keva taham, and they'll get contact in tamei from the graves of the deep. right? Ela mevi'in shvarim hamitzri. So instead, they bring these Egyptian oxen who were wider. The kids sat on there; they didn't want to move, and they stayed safe. Shekrisosehan rechavas, their bellies were so wide. Fatinakas yashvin al kabeim. All right, and the little kids sat on them. Again, these are the 8-year-olds who've been brought up the whole time. They're tahor. They're going to be the sprinklers. All right, the clusters show Evan bin B'yadehem. We're just being repetitive again, and they had their little earthenware cups in their hands. They go to Shiloh. They came to the spring of Shiloh. Yadom Iluim. This sounds familiar and deja vu. We just said this on the last page. The children would descend and fill up the cut. They went back on top of the wide-bellied oxen to go back with the water to the Temple Mount. But surely we have the case of a bed. All right. So we just defended Rav Elazar's assertion. Rav Yehuda considers even a legally defective shelter, meaning the natural ones, to be an ohel if at least they're the size of a fist. I mean, that kind of is not necessarily exactly matching what we just brought back, but we're just recapping. All right? You have a question? Yeah.
So how many years you said they stayed?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, they would keep these. We don't do this anymore.
No, I know.
Yeah, but in those days, that was the whole thing, that the pregnant women would come to Yerushalayim and they would make sure that they had the borrowed out excavated land underneath, so no tumid. But I'm not sure at the beginning if that was just the Tzedukim or not, the Sadducees, because I have to go back and look, but it's in the commentary there. But surely we have the case of a bed which has several fists of open space separating it underside from the ground. Okay, so here's the question. Now we're going back to Sukkah. If you have a bed in the Sukkah, remember the guy who was sleeping under the bed? All right. And there's enough space for several tvachim, all right? And certainly, I guess, the fist of the man, the son of the watermelon, name, whatever it was. I can't find it at the moment. Utnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda mer no chogim hayu, that it was our practice, shahayinu yishenim tachas amida b'fnei haskenim. Again, we're repeating before, he says, it was a policy that we used to, meaning the Talmidim would sleep under the beds, all right, to learn. But if Rav Elazar is correct in his assertion that Rav Yehuda accords the status of an ohel to a defective one, such that the bed should be considered an ohel, and the person sleeps on it, should not fulfill his obligation. Okay, so in other words, the problem here is that, again, we're bringing Rav Yehuda and we're saying, if they're sleeping underneath. See, I get very confused here because I keep on going back and forth with Rabbi Yehuda. So we're trying to explain, can you sleep under a bed or not sleep under a bed? Is this considered an ohel or is it not considered an ohel? If it is considered an ohel, all right, then you can be tamei in it. Are you yotzei or not? And so we keep on going back and forth to come to a conclusion. Shani mita ho v'lagaba. Says, the Gemara answers there, a bed is different since it's meant for use on its top. All right, so listen. So if you're going to say, again, thinking about beds, where do you normally sleep in the bed? You sleep on top of bed. Therefore, even, what? You don't ask me about bunk beds.
I won't ask.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was his first correct, because then the top bed's going to nullify the bottom bed. It's like the sukkahs.
So if you want to sleep in a sukkah with your family, you can't
Build multiple beds.
multiple
Yeah,
beds.
because
System
we
where
learned that
it's-
before with the sukkahs. If you build a sukkah on top of the sukkah, that the top sukkah is okay, but the bottom sukkah, the schach, so it's. I assume that same thing as a bunk bed, at least for that section.
Staggered though.
I said for that section. Yeah. So Most people in Florida don't sleep in the sukkahs. Shani mita ho l'gaba suya. All right, he says a bed is
What is
different.
Florida? I don't know what Florida is.
It's a place where there's abundant water. All right, a bed is different since it is meant for the use of its top. Therefore, even though the bed covers an airspace that is many fists in size, it's not considered to be an ohel over the airspace. So again, you see how we keep going back and forth. Is it an ohel? Is it not an ohel? All right. The Gemara persists. Shvarim nami legaban asuyim. But oxen, they are also meant for use of their tops. I mean, come on. Who rides an ox holding on to the bottom of the belly? You ride an ox. When does Rabbi Yehuda consider an ox an ohel that shields the child on top from a grave on the deep? So now we're asking that question because he says, wait a minute, the kid that's riding on top, how is that considered that he's protected from the graves of the dead? The Gemara differentiates between a bed and an ox. This is interesting. Kiyasa Rabban Amar Rav Elazar. When Ravin came to when Ravin came to Babylonia, to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, he said in the name of Elazar, Shavin Shvarim, Shane Shvarim, oxen are different. Ho Meginin al Haroin, since they shelter the shepherds, the Chama b'nei Chama, in the sunny season from the sun. I actually have a picture of this, but I don't want to waste time pulling it up. All right. And in the rainy season from the rain. So believe it or not, the shepherds that were out there with their ox, all right, if it was, they want to take a nap, the ox would lie down, the big oxes, and they kind of lie down just next to the ox and sleep, almost under the belly of the ox. Therefore, they got the shade from the ox. If it's raining, they do the same thing, all right? So guess what? So therefore, the ox are used for shelter under them, all right, and therefore constitute an ohel to the children on top of them from the grave of the deep. This is very interesting. So because the bottom of the ox can be used to actually shelter the shepherds, and it's big enough, therefore, from the ground, therefore, the kid who rides on top is sheltered from an ohel, even though it's not a man-made, which we started off, but it's naturally made ohel. Because we started off the whole thing with naturally made ohels, they don't count. Right? Wasn't that the first? Yeah. I keep on coming back to that, but I can never remember the first thing we learned. Okay. A bed, on the other hand, is not used for the shelter that it affords to the area below. So therefore, it's not considered an ohel over the area, regardless of its size. That's what they're saying now. If so, that an ox is deemed an ohel because the shepherds shelter themselves underneath. But listen to this answer. Mitanami, a bed should also be considered. Ho magina al minalim v'sandalim shetachtecha. When you go to sleep at night, where do you put your shoes? People put their shoes under their bed. A lot of times you see kids wear your shoes. They go crawl under the bed to find the shoe. All right. So shoes were put under the bed. Therefore, the bed really did serve as a purpose for sheltering what's underneath it. It doesn't sound familiar to what we just said about the oxen. Okay. By the way, it mentions here somewhere that the Rabbeim actually put their shoes under their bed or by the side of the bed to say, hey, this is where I sleep. This is like, I don't say taboo, but this is my private territory. This bed, don't come here. So I'm not totally sure if you're not supposed to come here because the shoes is like a fence showing you this is my private. How do we end up at the beginning with the Talmidim sleeping under the bed? Were they coming from the other end? So that's a side question. I don't have the answer for that. All right. Elama Rava. So rather Rava says, okay, we're right now about a third of the way down in this page. Shane Shvarim, oxen are different from bed. Hova Simla Agin Abnei Me'ayim Shelahem. They're made to shelter their entrails. What that means, and again, let me find this picture it takes too long. I had a picture of a see-through, it was a cow, and showed you the whole skeleton. And then it showed you the guts on the inside, all right? So in other words, what's the whole reason for a spine and everything? To shelter the insides. Without that, everything would, you can't, you'd be a worm or moving around. So, and he goes here, listen, he says, Shnamar, as he stated, or Vasa, Tabishi, Batsmas, Vigidim. Oh, that's interesting. They have a picture. No, that's not the picture I have, but oh, wait, is that the back of oh yeah. So over here they have the aerial view in the blue Gemaras of the spine of an ox. Again, but doesn't show you the insides.
Yeah.
All right. To say that that back is there to protect the insides. Again, another answer. So now we're quoting, all right, or sheni vatzamas begidim tisocheni, with skin and flesh have you clothed me, and with bones and sinews have you sheltered me. This is from Job. All right. I never got into Job, a depressing book. All right. So it says here, I'm just going to read the English, an alternative answer, according to which we can remain with our earlier premise that a bed does indeed constitute an ohel over the area underneath it, even according to Rav Yehuda.
Right, so it does not.
What?
Does?
According to this. All right. The Ibayasema, and if you wish, Rabbi Yehuda Tame, in ruling here that one sleeps on the bed fulfills his obligation, because now we're saying that there is a reason, a purpose, because initially we said there is no, a bed is only for sleeping above it. There's no purpose for below it. All right. And then we talked about the shoes. There is a purpose. Now then we brought a raya from the spine. Okay. Now we're saying, so if you're going to say it serves a purpose, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning stated elsewhere. Dama Sukka Diras Keva Bina. Now we're going to hear another way. He says elsewhere. He says that for a sukkah, I mean, we learned this already. You need a fixed dwelling, meaning basically 4 fixed walls, not some shabby shack that's going to fall apart. All right. V'havalei mita diras arai. But a bed is a temporary dwelling. I mean, how many times have you moved a bed in the bedroom because you found out, oh, it's facing the wrong direction, it's west, north, south. Oh, I don't like it. Oh, I got a new bed set. Oh, it's a different furniture. I mean, you can move a bed or a movable cot. Where it's not a permanent structure. You can't move your bedroom. You can move to another bedroom, right? But you can't move the bedroom. It's permanent. So too here, the sukkah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is permanent, all right? But the bed is temporary. So you can't nullify the permanent with a temporary, right? The sukkah keva, velo ase, keva. And the law is that a temporary shelter cannot come and nullify a fixed shelter.
Ah.
The Gemara challenges this, of course. You say, what way? The Gemara comes with another challenge. But how Rabbi Shimon, but we have in our Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon, Dabar Nami, Sukka Dira Keva Binan, who also says that for Sukkah we require fixed dwelling. So Rabbi Shimon agreed with that. All right. For us say, oh, all right, but what does he do? He rules that a temporary shelter can nullify a fixed shelter. So Rav Shimon goes against Rav Yehuda. All right, so we're going to have an answer for this. So our answer is, Ein Bahab Pligi. Indeed, in this matter, they actually both agree. There's no argument. I say, oh, all right, all right. The Rav Shimon holds that a temporary shelter, despite its inferiority to a fixed shelter, can come and nullify a fixed shelter, all right? Therefore, he rules that the area sheltered by the bed is not deemed to be within the sukkah proper. Umasava, lo say oil, all right, vato oil keva. Whereas the master Rabbi Yehuda holds that a temporary shelter cannot come and nullify a permanent shelter. Therefore, he rules that the area sheltered by the bed is deemed to be within the sukkah proper. Don't ask me what I just said. It didn't make sense to me. And I don't want to read it again. because I only have 12 minutes left. When you get a chance, read that again. Well, let's read it again. Okay, that's a cop out. All right. Marsavar Shmuel's whole Shimon, holds that a temporary shelter, despite that it's inferior to a fixed shelter, can come and nullify a fixed shelter. All right, that's the opposite of what we just said, that you can't take a temporary. Right. Therefore, he rules that the area sheltered by the bed is not deemed to be within the sukkah proper. See, that's what I don't understand what he means by that. Oh, meaning that it doesn't count. And I guess if you sleep under it, it can come and can't. Oh, and therefore you're not yotze. That's what he means. I think so. But Rabbi Yehuda holds a temporary shelter cannot come and nullify a permanent shelter. Therefore, he rules that the area sheltered by the bed is deemed to be within the sukkah. See, I know, got to go over this a couple of times. Amar Rav Shimon Maseh B'Tavi Avdo. Oh, remember that story at the beginning with the Avid sleeping? Let's go over that again. All right. So it was the incident involving Tummy, very smart slave. All right. The Gemara, by the way, I think he eventually, we learned, was freed because he had his tooth knocked out by his Rav Shimon, but then, so he felt so good, I finally made him to be able to be Jewish. Then there was a problem because he knocked it out by accident, therefore it didn't count. I don't know, there's a whole story there, whatever. Anyway, eventually he did get freed and become from guy Jewish. Yeah, it's cool. All right, Tanya, it was torn in the Brisa. Amar Rav Shimon, Mesichosel Shel Rabban Gamliel, from Rabban Gamliel's casual conversation. And let me mention it to be words. This is casual. It's casual day. Must have been Friday. Lamado Shnei Dvarim. We learned two things. Lamado Shavanim P'turim Min HaSukkah. We learned, first of all, that an Eved doesn't have to dwell in the sukkah. Right. All right, that's from the stories. Lamado Shayashon Tachas Hamita. We also learned that if you sleep under a bed, you're not Yotzei Yidei Chavasa. All right? Why? Because the Eved didn't have to sleep in the sukkah. All right? So therefore, if you did sleep in the sukkah, you weren't Yotzei Yidei Chavasa. That's why Tabai slept underneath. In other words, there's two parts to the story. All right? One part is that Avadim don't have to be Yotzei in this, they're exempt from dwelling in the sukkah. We said dwelling is sleeping, eating, and what was the last thing? Eating something and sleeping. We started with that. There was three things. Drinking, whatever we do on Shabbos. Eat, sleep, and learn, I guess. It's not be merry. Whatever. All right. Shmooze. Okay, learn. All right, we learned the rest of the all right. Gemara questions Rav Shimon's peculiar choice of the words of the Brisa. So let's learn from this. Milsa Agav Orcha Kamash Malan. Rav Shimon is teaching us incidentally something else. Ki hadama Rav Acha bar Ada, as Rav Acha bar Ada taught for Amrei La, and others say Amar Rav Acha bar Ada, Amar Rav Hamnuna, Amar Rav. They call somebody else's name. This was something big to learn. Where do we know that even casual conversations from Torah scholars require study? What this means is you don't just learn in a shir when the Rebbe teaches you, this is what it says in the Gemara edition for the, we used to say you learn from example. If the Rav, whichever does something casually, says something casually, there's Torah behind it. They don't use their words loosely. All right? Shenemo Valeo Lo Yibo, and he quotes this from Tehillim, that their leaves do not wither, that they're like trees that grow on the side of the water and they're strong. Their leaves don't wither. You want the whole pasuk? Let me go look at Tehillim. It's fruits in its season. yibo, and the leaves don't wither. And everything that he does succeeds. The Talmidei Chachamim, the tzaddikim, will like these trees. Mishnah. So we're up to Mishnah now at the bottom. We still have a few minutes. Okay, the bottom Mishnah on Chaf Aleph on the base. Right. If one supports his sukkah with the posts of a bed, okay, and there's again a picture in there. You see a bed, and it's a 4-post bed. It goes all the way up to the top, and the schach is on top. All right. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, God bless you. If the sukkah cannot stand on its own, meaning it's flimsy, then it's not valid. All right? That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The Gemara explains Rabbi Yehuda's statement. My time at the Rabbi Yehuda, what's this reason that it's invalidated if it's flimsy? Plige by Rav Zera Rabbi Abba. All right? Mato. Rav Zera Rabbi Abba Mamo, disagree about this matter. Chanama, one says Rabbi Yehuda invalidates such a sukkah, the nation la keva, because it lacks that it's fixed. All right, like we said before, like a permanency. All right. The Chadama one says Rabbi Yehuda invalidates it. Nation mamidav bedavar mekabel tuma. He says no. The problem there is that what he was using, the wooden bed, is mekabel tuma. Can itself become tummy because it's something that grows from the ground. So if you use something and it's mekabel tuma and the schach, I think the problem here is something where this was connected to the schach. Let me say, since he supports, he says, for since these supports are the basis of the schach, it is regarded as if the person used items susceptible to tumah for the schach itself. That's what Rashi says. Ooh. Rashi's comments indicate that the disqualification of supporting the schach with something susceptible to tumah is a biblical one. Many Rishonim, however, maintain that this is rabbinic. My benayu. So what's the practical difference between them? Kigan shenat shapudin shabazo. What if you use a what do you call it? What's a metal bed called? Wrought iron bed, and it's got wrought iron poles that go all the way top, and then he puts the schach on top of that. That's not good either. All right, that's the sukkah is fixed in one place, but its schach is held up. That's something susceptible to tumah again. According to the one who says Rabbi Yehuda invalidates the bed because it lacks thickness, but the iron spike one is the wrought iron one is fixed. All right, it is stable. But the one who says it's invalidated by Rabbi Yehuda because it's mekabel tumah, when it holds up schach with something susceptible to tumah, haray mamida b'davar mekabel tuva, indeed holds up with something susceptible to it, and the sukkah is invalid. Either way, it seems that if it's mekabel tumah, the sides, it's invalid. Now, you know what's interesting? There's a rabbi in this neighborhood. I once came by before sukkahs, and I saw him building his sukkah. We're almost done here. And I got 3 lines left in 3 minutes. And I saw him taking out, usually we have these like hurricane brackets, they're shaped like this, and you have them like on your, what's the wood under the roof called again? On the sides. Now rafters hold up the roof. Anyway, the siding, whatever it is. And then you come and you put in your 2x4s and it goes out, and that's how most people here in Florida have their sukkahs. So he was going and he took out all the metal that connected the wood to the wood, and he went and he made like plugs, like when you make certain old wood furniture and they use a dowel inside 2 holes, and he was making it so the wood plugged in the wood. There was no metal whatsoever. He was avoiding that whole issue of being mekabel tumah, and this, just like people with the instant sukkahs, they put the canvas on top. Then they put so there's all these rules and regulations. Yes, your local Orthodox rabbi. I have less than 3 minutes for 3 lines. The Mishnah refers only in the case where one supports the schach of el sikech agav hamita, but one who placed the schach over the bed. This is what I just mentioned, so that the boards of the bed form the walls of the sukkah, but the schach rests on a separate fixed freestanding plane, Shera, which is the way most people do it here. Then Rabbi Yehuda would rule that the sukkah is valid. My timer, what's the reason? According to the one who invalidates it because it's supported by the bedposts, it says because it lacks fixedness. Hare yesh la keba. This sukkah whose schach rests on the fixed frame has fixedness. So again, it goes back and forth between whether or not you're saying it's lacking fixedness or it's mekabel tuma, and that's how we basically end up today. Tomorrow we'll continue with 22 Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. I'm sorry for the things I might have said wrong. I hope anything we learned right is for, as a rabbi says, panacea for the pandemic, and anybody else needs to refer shleima for Katsei at the beginning. And for anyone who learns this in Kazakhstan, it loses something in the translation. Okay, see ya. Bye.